In 1968, a man named John Calhoun built a paradise for mice. Unlimited food, unlimited water, zero predators, perfect temperature control. It was designed to be a utopia, a biological heaven engineered to support thousands of lives in perpetual comfort. He called it Universe 25. But within a few generations, something horrifying happened. The mice stopped breeding. They stopped socializing. They stopped acting like mice entirely. A specific caste emerged that Calhoun called the beautiful ones. These males withdrew from society completely. They did not fight. They did not court females. They did nothing but eat, sleep, and groom themselves. They were physically healthy. Their coats were sleek, but their spirits were necrotic. They had lost the capacity for stress, and in doing so, they lost the capacity for life. They simply existed in a state of passive, glossy decay until the entire population, despite having every resource imaginable, went extinct. Total colony collapse, not from famine, not from disease, but from a lack of struggle. You are living in Universe 25. The screen in front of you is the feeder. The algorithm is the climate control. And that numbness you feel, that heavy, leaden certainty that the world is ending and there is no point in trying, is not an intellectual insight. It is not a realization of the truth. It is a biological signal. It is the grooming behavior of a beautiful one waiting to die. You call it the doomer mindset. We call it behavioral sync. But to understand why you have voluntarily walked into this cage and why you feel an odd, comforting warmth when you lock the door, we have to look at a specific microscopic change happening in your anterior cingulate cortex right now, a change that determines whether you are biologically capable of hope or if you have crossed the threshold into permanent structural despair. Look at the modern landscape. It is a cathedral of low-grade anxiety. You wake up, you check the black mirror, you are immediately flooded with data points of collapse, economic recession, environmental heat death, geopolitical fracture. The human brain was evolved to process the trauma of a localized tribe, a circle of 150 people. It was not built to process the simultaneous agony of 8 billion. When you scroll, you are not just consuming information. You are injecting cortisol directly into your bloodstream. You are triggering the fight or flight response, but you are not fighting and you are not fleeing. You are lying still. This creates a state of frozen arousal. Your body screams for action. Your mind screams for safety. Your environment offers neither. The result is a short circuit. A psychological fuse blows to protect the system. You go numb. You retreat. You adopt the aesthetic of the giving up. This is the first seduction of the doomer. It frames cowardice as wisdom. It frames lethargy as enlightenment. It tells you that because the game is rigged, the smartest move is not to play. It feels intellectual. It feels like you have peered behind the curtain of reality and seen the gears of the machine grinding to a halt. But this is a hallucination. It is a defense mechanism disguised as a philosophy. When you adopt the belief that it's over, you are essentially signing a peace treaty with your own trauma. If success is impossible, then failure is not your fault. If the world is burning, then your lack of ambition is not a flaw. It is a rational response. It is the ultimate narcotic. It creates a feedback loop of validation. You seek out content that confirms your hopelessness. The algorithm, observing your dwell time on images of decay and headlines of disaster, feeds you more. It built a silo of misery around you, concrete, impenetrable, deafening. But to understand why this silo is nearly impossible to escape, we must look at something far more disturbing than an algorithm. We must look at the physical rot occurring inside your
skull. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself. It is usually discussed as a positive force, the mechanism of learning and growth. But neuroplasticity is neutral. It works in reverse. If you spend 12 hours a day in a state of passive consumption and cynical resignation, your brain will optimize itself for that state. It will prune away the neural pathways associated with agency. It will atrophy the connections in the prefrontal cortex responsible for long-term planning and impulse control. You are literally dismantling the hardware required to save yourself. The hippocampus, the region responsible for memory and emotional regulation, begins to shrink under the constant bath of cortisol. This is not a metaphor. Your brain is physically withering. You are becoming neurologically incapable of imagining a future that isn't catastrophic. The doomer creates a brain that can only process doom. This is where the concept of learned helplessness transitions from a psychological theory to a physiological reality. In the 1960s, Martin Seligman discovered that if you subject a dog to shocks it cannot escape, it will eventually stop trying. Even when you open the cage door, even when the exit is clear and the pain is avoidable. The dog will lay down and whine. It has learned that action is futile. You are the dog. The shocks are the headlines. The cage is your room. The open door is the vast, terrifying potential of your own life. But you do not see the door. You only see the shocks. You have conditioned yourself to believe that agency is a myth. You look at the economy and see a wall. You look at the dating market and see a void. You look at the climate and see a fire. And because you believe these barriers are absolute, you do not test them. You do not push. You simply groom your coat and wait for the end. There is a darker layer to this, a layer that involves the monetization of your impotence. There is an entire economy built on keeping you in the pit, the outrage industrial complex, the black pill influencers, the engagement farmers who mine your despair for ad revenue. They do not want you to fix your life. A happy, self-actualized person is a terrible consumer. They do not doom scroll. They do not buy supplements to fix a broken masculinity. They do not rage comment. They are out in the world, building. To the machine, your happiness is a lost customer. Your misery is a renewable resource. They have weaponized your survival instinct. They hijack the amygdala, the threat detection center of the brain. They keep it permanently activated. You are in a state of constant, low-level terror. You are exhausted, yet sleepless, wired, yet paralyzed. This creates the perfect host for the parasite of nihilism. Nihilism, in its true philosophical form, is a challenge. It asks, if nothing matters, what will you create? But doomer nihilism is lazy. It says, nothing matters, so I will rot. It is a corruption of the concept. It takes the void and fills it with self-pity. It romanticizes the aesthetic of the loser, the Wojak memes, the slowed-down reverb music, the imagery of lonely night walks and fluorescent-lit convenience stores. It turns depression into a subculture. It gives you a tribe of the hopeless. And once you have a tribe, leaving becomes an act of betrayal. If you start to improve, if you start to hit the gym, if you start to build a business, if you start to hope, you are ostracized by the bucket of crabs. You are coping, you are blue-pilled, you are deluding yourself. The tribe demands your misery as the price of admission. But beneath the social pressure, there is a chemical hook that is harder to break than any peer pressure. The brain releases dopamine not just for pleasure, but for anticipation. When you predict a negative outcome and it happens, you get a strange, twisted reward. You were right. You predicted the collapse, and here it is. This is the prophet of doom complex.
Cynical feels like being intelligent. It feels safe. Hope is dangerous. Hope implies a risk of disappointment. Hope implies that you have skin in the game. Cynicism protects the ego. If you bet on failure, you can never lose. This safety is addictive. It wraps you in a blanket of certainty. You know how the movie ends. Everyone dies. The hero fails. The girl leaves. The civilization collapses. By clinging to this script, you avoid the terrifying ambiguity of living. You avoid the possibility that you might try and fail. You avoid the responsibility of your own potential. This brings us to the shadow self. Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The doomer projects his shadow onto the world. He feels weak, so he sees a world where strength is impossible. He feels lonely, so he sees a world where love is a transaction. He feels purposeless, so he sees a universe devoid of meaning. The world becomes a mirror of his internal chaotic state. He creates a tautology. I am miserable because the world is bad. No, the world is tragic, yes, but you see only the bad because you are miserable. You are wearing lenses grinded from your own pathology. You filter out the beauty. You filter out the opportunity. You filter out the kindness. You leave only the rot. And then you point to the rot and say, see, I told you. This filtration system is physically encoded in the reticular activating system, RAS. The RAS is the gatekeeper of your attention. It decides what information gets through to your conscious mind. If you program your RAS with the belief that it is over, it will tirelessly search the environment for evidence to support that belief. It will highlight every rude interaction, every rejection, every piece of bad news. It will simultaneously blind you to every smile, every open door, every moment of grace. You are hacking your own perception to ensure your own misery. You are building a prison and handing the key to the warden of confirmation bias. But the most dangerous aspect of the doomer mindset is not what it does to you today. It is what it does to your timeline. It erases the future. Humans are teleological beings. We are driven by goals, by a vision of tomorrow. When you delete the future, you destroy the engine of the present. Without a destination, there is no reason to fuel the car. There is no reason to endure the pain of discipline. Why lift the heavy weight if the body will rot? Why learn the skill if the AI will take the job? Why save the money if the currency will collapse?
This temporal truncation forces you into a state of pure hedonistic immediacy, or worse, pure anhedonistic stagnation. You exist in an everlasting now that is devoid of texture. This is the time perception of the deeply depressed. The days blur, the weeks evaporate. You look up and 5 years have passed. You haven't moved. You haven't grown. You have only aged. You must understand the distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. It is the friction of reality. Suffering is a choice. Suffering is the story you tell yourself about the pain. The doomer takes the pain of existence, which is real and valid, and spins it into a narrative of victimization. I am suffering because I am a victim of the generation, the economy, the genetics. This narrative is a cage. It absolves you of the need to act. It places the locus of control outside of your reach. If the problem is capitalism or hypergamy or the boomers, then you are powerless. And if you are powerless, you are innocent. This innocence is the drug. It is the sweet, sickly syrup of the martyr. However, to break this addiction, we have to look at the mechanism of dopamine fasting and why it usually fails for the doomer, and what must be done instead. You cannot simply remove the stimulus. If you take the screen away from the doomer, he does not suddenly become enlightened. He faces the abyss. He faces the silence where his thought
Used to be drowned out. This silence is terrifying. It is filled with the voices of his own inadequacy. So he runs back to the screen. To cure the rot, you do not just stop the poisoning. You must administer the antidote. The antidote is not optimism. Optimism is just as delusional as pessimism if it is not rooted in action. The antidote is competence. Competence is the only force that quiets the amygdala. When you get good at something, anything, you prove to your brain that you have agency. You prove that your actions have consequences on the physical world. You lift a weight and the muscle grows. You write a code and the program runs. You clean a room and the chaos recedes. These are small victories, but they are neurologically vital. They rebuild the feedback loop that the screen has destroyed. They teach the brain, I act, and reality changes. This is the spark that reignites the engine. It is the reversal of learned helplessness. You have to understand the scale of the enemy. You are fighting a billion-dollar infrastructure designed to keep you docile. You are fighting your own evolutionary biology, which prefers safety to growth. You are fighting a culture that fetishizes irony and detaches from sincerity. Sincerity is risky. To care is to be vulnerable. The doomer armors himself in irony. He jokes about his depression. He jokes about the end of the world. But the joke is a deflection. It is a way to touch the truth without being burned by it. But you need to burn. You need to feel the heat of your own wasted potential. You need to get angry, not at the world, not at the system, but at yourself. Anger is a mobilizing emotion. Sadness is a paralyzing one. The doomer is sad. The survivor is angry. Anger says, I deserve better than this. Anger says, I will not let this be the end of my story. You need to transmute your despair into a cold, hard aggression against your own lethargy. You need to declare war on the part of you that wants to rot. This is not about thinking positive. It is about acting effectively. It is about moving the body even when the mind screams no. It is about overriding the beautiful one programming. The concept of the black pill, the idea that genetics and circumstance determine everything, is a half-truth that operates as a lie. Yes, genetics matter. Yes, circumstance matters. But the variance within your control is massive. The difference between you at your absolute worst and you at your absolute best is the difference between a tragedy and a triumph. The doomer focuses on the ceiling, the limits of what is possible. The achiever focuses on the floor, the foundation he is building. You cannot move the ceiling, but you can raise the floor. You can stack bricks. Let us return to the rat utopia, Universe 25. The colony collapsed because the rats lost their social role. They had no function. They were consumers of resources, nothing more. A human being without a function is a ghost. You need a burden. You need a load to carry. The weight is not what breaks you. The weight is what grounds you. Without a load, you float away into the ether of anxiety. You need to find something heavy, a responsibility, a career, a family, a mission, and lift it. The strain on your shoulders will silence the noise in your head. There is a phenomenon known as post-traumatic growth. It is the opposite of PTSD. It is the realization that trauma can break you open. It can burn away the triviality. The doomer looks at the trauma of the world and sees a reason to give up. The stoic looks at the trauma of the world and sees a training ground. The chaos is not an error. It is the curriculum. You are being tested, and you are failing the test because you refuse to pick up the pencil. You are sitting in the exam room, staring at the clock, waiting for the bell to ring so you can leave. But there is no bell. There is only the exam, and you are grading yourself every single day. Consider the aesthetic of
Bloomer, the counter-archetype. It is not about naive happiness, it is about the joy of the struggle. It is Camus' Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the hill and smiling. Why does he smile? Because the boulder is his. The hill is his. The struggle makes him real. The doomer wants the boulder to vanish. He wants the hill to be flat. He wants a life of zero friction. But a life of zero friction is a life of zero traction. You cannot move forward without friction. You are spinning your wheels on ice, complaining that the car won't move. Step off the ice. Step onto the rough ground. It will hurt. It will be difficult. But you will move. We must also address the paradox of choice. The modern world offers infinite options, infinite entertainment, infinite career paths, infinite partners. This abundance creates paralysis. You are terrified of making the wrong choice, so you make no choice. You stand in the hallway, staring at 1,000 doors, until you starve to death. The doomer decides that because he cannot open every door, he will sit on the floor. The solution is to pick a door, any door, and walk through it. It is better to be wrong and moving than right and stationary. You can correct a moving object. You cannot steer a parked car. Now, recall the open loop, the question of the physiological point of no return. Is there a moment where the brain rot becomes permanent, where the neural pathways of despair are so calcified that they cannot be broken? The science suggests something terrifying and miraculous. The brain remains plastic until the very end, but the energy required to change the trajectory increases exponentially with time. Every day you spend in the doomer mindset, you are digging the trench deeper. The walls get higher, the sky gets smaller. There is no hard limit where it becomes impossible, but there is a soft limit where it becomes improbable. The escape velocity required to leave the gravity well of depression increases the longer you stay on the surface. You are not at the point of no return yet. If you are listening to this, you are still lucid enough to understand the trap. But you are drifting close to the event horizon. The pull is getting stronger. The light is getting dimmer. You have to act before the atrophy becomes total. You have to shock the system. This requires a pattern interrupt. You need to do something radically different today. Not tomorrow, today. Turn off the phone. Walk outside. Sprint until your lungs burn. Cold shower. Stare at a wall for an hour. Do anything that breaks the hypnotic rhythm of your consumption. You need to remind your body that it is alive. You need to remind your brain that it is not a passenger. It is the driver. The world is not ending. Your world is ending. And you are the one pressing the button. Stop pressing it. The apocalypse is a fantasy. The collapse is a cope. The reality is that the world will keep turning, with or without you. The only question is whether you will be a participant or a spectator. The beautiful ones in Universe 25 died out because they forgot how to struggle. Do not let that be your epitaph. Do not let the comfort of the cage seduce you into extinction. The door is open. It has always been open. The only thing keeping you inside is the story you keep telling yourself. Change the story. Stop the rot, or the rot will stop you. The choice is yours, but the time is not. It ticks. It waits for no one, and it is running out.